Today we are going to begin installation of a Trio 2-axis autopilot in this 1977 Grumman Cheetah.
So we would like to ask you please subscribe, hit the like button, and hit the notify to stay current with our content. So as we said in our intro, we're going to be doing a Trio Autopilot install, removing the old equipment. We're going to be breaking it into 3 different parts so you'll be able to see all the different pieces. So part 1 will be removing the old equipment, part 2 will be all the wiring, part 3 will be finished up with the flight testing. So stay tuned for some more fun.
So now I'm feeding it back under the baggage compartment to put my big coils of unused cable in. As you can see, it's easier to feed it outside the aircraft and then through the holes. Otherwise you end up with a big cable snag. The one thing you do want to pay attention to is as you're pulling this, pull nice and slow. What you want to avoid is any kinks like this, which will catch on your pass-throughs and other things, making it a real pain in the rear to pull it through. So now we'll move into the floor underneath the baggage compartment and pull our main run back and decide how much we're sending back through to the servos, which will live right here. Now as we go to put the cables in the baggage compartment, we're going to go through this access hole right here. So I have to take out the screws to open that hole up. But one thing I have found through experience is when you're working back here, you're going to want to slide the canopy forward, because I can't tell you how many times I've left DNA in the aircraft climbing in and out of this area. So I typically slide it forward with the hinge point of the baggage door, so as I come in and out, I'm not whacking myself in the head. So for those that have never been under your baggage compartment floor, this is what it looks like. We've got a series of pulleys. Now we ran that cable through that hole, and you want to verify that there is some sort of protection on that hole. So wire grommet or a regular grommet. We're going to come through there, but one thing I did want to show you is how much extra cable is in that harness. So you can see the roll servo stops right here. So you can see roll servo almost makes it to the aileron after routing through the cabin the longest way around. And the pitch servo comes about 2 feet past the end of the wingtip. So we don't want this cable up in the hell hole around the flat motor area. So we're going to coil it back in this area and feed back the short distance, let's say 2 feet, 18 inches forward, and then connect it to the servos. So now at this stage in the game, we've got our harness run from our instrument head area over the panel down to the floor back here. Now we're going to secure that harness in place now that we have our lengths. So that'll take a few minutes. And then we will coil underneath the back seat, or underneath the baggage area, and feed our short lengths back up to the servos. And then next step, servo install. When you receive your package from the STC group, you'll have a pitch package and a roll package that's associated with the 2 servos. First thing you want to do is prepare the servos, which you'll see I go through and I check mark as I go just to make sure I don't miss anything. You're going to enlarge the 4 corner mounting holes of each servo with the number 16 drill bit. And then you're going to clean those up to make sure there's no burrs. So I've already done that. And then I'm going to open up these packages, and you'll see I've got trays for each servo. I like to put all the hardware in the associated bins, and that way I can make sure I've used all the pieces and haven't missed anything. Within these packages, these are the Grumman specific parts that the STC group has developed. They've done a marvelous job of packaging this up with part numbers for each one, individual part numbers within each envelope. It's really a very straightforward, very nice kit. We're now going to prepare the roll servo. So you can see here we've got a very nice kit from STC Group. I'm looking for the roll servo kit. We're going to open that up, take a look and see what's inside. You'll notice that on each servo it says which one it is. I tend to put a label on the top once the servo is installed in the plane, so as you look down on it, the roll servo will be positioned this way, so this is facing the front of the airplane. You can't see that label, so I tend to put a P-toucher, a labeler on this side. I'm sorry. The roll servo goes that way, the pitch servo goes that way. Just an easy way to identify. Also put a label on the harness in case it gets disconnected, but it's pretty straightforward. So we're going to lay out all our parts here. You'll see each part has or each bag of parts has a part number in it, which makes it very nice to put this guy together. And so what we're looking for is the taper pin cover, which if you look at the servo, you've got taper pins there. This goes over those to ensure there's no way that they can come out. It's just a protective device. And you'll see the holes line up on the servo. So we're now going to install this 2-inch extension for the pitch servo, and we're going to attach it. You can see here the part number. We're going to attach it with these M3 hex screws and these star washers. So stand by as we do that. As you install this, you want to verify that the taper pin cover is indeed covering the taper pins. This extension is set up very nicely in that it just slides over the shaft, and we'll get that one started and put the other 3 in before we tighten anything up. So we'll get that snugged in. These are already pre-coated with Loctite, so we don't have to worry about putting any kind of Loctite on them. So I'm going to get that one snug and get the other 3 installed. You can see here they just screw in. Loctite gives you a little bit of resistance, but don't worry about that. And I believe this is a 3/16 Allen wrench. Definitely imperial, not metric. And I'll do the other 2 and not make you watch. So one thing I failed to mention previously is as you fit this extension on, you want to make sure that you can get a cotter pin through here. The extension has a hole and the shaft has a hole. That's a additional safety item to ensure this pitch servo extension does not come off in flight. So we're going to snug those star washers down and then give them a quarter turn max, and then we will put the cotter pin in to secure that extension arm and ensure that it doesn't come off. Included in the kit are the cotter pins you need for this. STC Group sends both stainless steel and CAD plated ones. For this one and this one, we're going to use the stainless steel cotter pins. So we'll pour these guys onto the table, grab the ones I need, and put the other ones back in the bag. And then we'll keep that bag closed because it has the part numbers for the cotter pins, and we'll put it back in our unused bin. So we'll put this cotter pin through this hole and then split it. And as you split it, you're going to have to go over the heads of the hex screws. And in that scenario, you can use your favorite duckbill pliers to get over it. And then we'll just bring them around and dress that pretty. Okay, now we have a cotter pin installed. That looks good. Now we'll move on to the next step. Next, we're going to install the servo arm. Note that on the roll servo, the servo arm faces up. On the pitch servo, the servo arm faces down. You'll see this is machined for two different ways. So what we're going to do is center the roll servo, and we're using that taper pin cover as our center mark. So we'll get that straight up and down. We'll reference where the threaded screws are and look for the countersunk on the outside, and that will go over the top like that. And then we will use our M3 by 10 millimeter Phillip head screws to secure that to the extension. If there's any question on what screw is what, this part number corresponds to the included parts schematic that STC's group supplies with it. It's in this document, the illustrated parts catalog for the kit. So they give you an overview of the installation, the roll servo provisions and part numbers, and then the pitch servo provisions and parts numbers. So we will now attach those, and these also have Loctite on them. So we'll get them started and then snug them down. Once we get those snug down, we'll add the cotter pin on the outside of this as well. And we'll put it up on end so you can see what's going on. These are a #1 Phillips head screw. If you don't have a #1 head, go out and get one. #1 bit. #2 bit will just booger these up. Proper tool for proper job. Always comes out nice and pretty. Okay. Got them all tight. Give them a little snug. Make sure they're not going anywhere. And then we'll put the cotter pin through, and this assembly will be ready to go. We'll set it aside and work on the pitch servo. Pitch servo is almost identical, with the exception that the arm points down instead of up. And there you have it. The roll servo is ready for the next step. So now we're going to switch over. You can see the roll servo, the arm faces up. And now we're going to repeat the process with the pitch servo. So we'll set that aside. And I won't bore you with that install. Now, one thing I will point out with the pitch servo, when you're configuring it, the extension is slightly longer than on the roll servo, you can see here. Just pay attention to the part numbers included with the kit and you'll be fine. Now, one thing I overlooked on the roll servo, which I have to go back and fix, is I forgot to put the NAS 1149F 0563P washer between the arm and the cotter pin, which I'm doing now on the pitch servo, and after I get this installed, I will go back and put it back on the roll servo. So we're going to get that cotter pin in there, and this cotter pin up top, and then we'll bend them in place, and the pitch servo will be ready to go. Next step in our installation is to install the roll servo push rod arm onto this clip, and I'm looking at it straight down. We're going to install it onto this bolt here. So we're going to have to remove this shorter bolt, put a longer bolt that's supplied with the kit on here, and then this arm will go right there. So what you'll need to do is remove the clips or safety wire from this turnbuckle. I like to mark it very well so I know where I'm at, because I've already done my rigging check and I know I'm right in specs. So I'll loosen this. You'll see reference to either notching this to get that bolt out. But what I like to do is actually loosen the cable enough and then actually take this bolt out from the aileron torque tube, which I don't know if you could see that, and then take the control horn off, put the bolt through, and put the control horn back on. So we're going to do that now. So now we've got this loosened up. I have taken off the aileron horn bolt here, so I can slide this out enough to get this bolt, stand by, to get this bolt here out and replace it with the STC group supplied bolt. So I will see if I can make this work. So I'm going to get the STC group bolt ready to go on. Alright, so we've got a couple of specialty washers and spacers that go on here. The roll servo control arm, the rod ends have different sizes on the on each end to accommodate the, let's see, come on baby, helps if you're not leaning on the cable when you do it. Okay, so we're going to put this guy through. You want to make sure the nut goes to the side, or to the center of the aircraft. Man, looks like I have to pull that off just a little bit more to get that in. And get this in the center. As you can tell, it's a multi-handed process. So you get this guy in first, and then we put the arm from the back side in, which is not cooperating. So this will come up here. And that will go through those pieces. Now to get through the other side of the yoke with the bolt, we're going to put a spacer, which hopefully you can still see this. Let's get up here maybe. That'll help us. Alright, so we've got the longer clevis bolt through. We go the larger spacer. Then we're going to put the larger hole end of the arm through. We're going to put the supplied spacer in. And then we're going to put castellated nut on the end. And in these scenarios where it's kind of hard to see the hole in the bolt, I put a pen mark on the actual end so I know where the holes are. So I'm going to get this back together and then we'll move forward. And this will give you a better view of the control arm I loosened. This is the bolt. Nut goes on the back side. That allows us to slide this horn out and make that connection a lot easier, as opposed to drilling out a section of this or cutting out a section so we can get that clevis bolt through. So this is our assembly. Down here, I don't know if you can see it, but that's our finished assembly with the spacer, rod arm, washer, castellated nut, and safety cotter pin on it. And next step is position and mount the servos. Now that we've got the roll servo push-pull installed onto here, we're going to reset our rigging. And hopefully you can see on here that I have some marks from when I loosened it. So we'll tighten that up. And for those that of you that haven't used these tools, chain to hold the cable end in a turnbuckle wrench, for lack of a better term. These make this a lot easier. Once we get that to the marks, we'll temporarily put our clips back in and then go check with our rigging fixtures to make sure we're back where we started. So now that I've confirmed our cable tension is good, right about 35 pounds, and I have confirmed that in the neutral yoke position our ailerons are both at 0. At this point, now I can put the clips in and make this part done. Our next step in the installation is to mount the roll servo. As you can see, we've got it positioned approximately 4 inches off of this tube. And what we're looking for is to make sure we have no interference with this cable up here and the elevator cables. So what I'm going to do now is find that position. We're going to make it flush with the rear of the honeycomb right here. And then we're going to hole punch and drill with a number 30 and then enlarge that hole to a number 16. We now have the roll servo positioned. It's not bolted. Right now I've got the bolts going from the top down. They'll actually come from the bottom up. But that gets us positioned, verified that we're in good shape on interference with any of the control cables. So now we're going to move over to put in the pitch servo. And as you can see, there's a factory installed harness right here that we'll have to shift over to make room for the roll servo to be installed. Or I'm sorry, the pitch servo to be installed. So that's what we're going to work on next. We're now going to position the pitch servo for installation and drilling holes. And you can see we got a couple challenges here. So the existing installation had this cable harness, which is easily moved over. The other challenge we had was this flap indicator cable was right in the way of the servo arm swinging. So we'll shift that over and re-secure it to the honeycomb with a screw, so there's no chance of it coming loose and interfering. What we're looking for here is to make sure that the bolt head on the pitch servo right here doesn't rub up against the elevator control cable. So what we're going to do is play the nice game or dance of making it perfect, and then we'll secure that back here with a cable clamp supplied with the kit. But I think we're in pretty good shape, so now we're going to go ahead and drill the holes through the honeycomb and secure the servo, and then we'll reposition these cables to make it all pretty and safe. We've now shifted the flap indicator cable so it doesn't interfere with our arm, and now we'll reposition the servo in. When I position this, I like to put the whole assembly together. In the manual it says to add this later, but this gives me a better indication of clearance and or any issues that I might have in the process. And now we're going to adjust that for clearance, square it up, make sure that's happy, which that looks beautiful. And now we will set our hole punches. So we have clearance on this side, we have clearance on that side, we have no interference over here, and we'll reroute this cable bundle once we have it secured in place. And now we're in the bottom of the plane. We just secured our servos through the bottom with these screws. You want to take careful note that you don't dimple the honeycomb. You can see on this one I've got a slight dimple, but definitely don't over tighten them or you'll end up with a big ugly. You can also use wide area washers under these, but I prefer the aesthetic of not putting the wide area washers. We now have the pitch servo and the roll servo secured. I have not put the cotter pin in here because we're going to do some adjustments once we power up the servos and find zero and find travels. You can see over here on the pitch servo, I was able to reroute these cables and secure them out of the way. No interference. We've got good clearance on all of our control cables. Next step will be to secure this push rod arm to the cable using the cable clamps. We now have both the roll servo and the pitch servo installed. One thing I like to do is not bend over this cotter pin and this cotter pin until I have everything adjusted, the system powered up, and verify that my travels are good and my center positions are good. So next step back here, which will wrap this up, is to pin these connectors. So the pitch servo connection will go here. The roll servo connection mounts on the back, and then we'll dress these cables up and we're done back here. And then we'll switch over to this wiring. So our head unit's going to live in this hole. This is for a JPI 730. I've left this out right now just to make the installation of the Trio head a little more easy to access. The hole directly above is for our Autopilot recover button, and we'll go from there. Now, in the process of installing this for the pitch servo, you want to make sure you have the control. The elevator is locked in the neutral position, which I use this rigging tool that the GPA produced. One side's for the AA5 series, the other side is for the AA1 series. But when you install this, it will lock the elevators in your neutral position. And then if you look at my wing tips, or my elevator tips, I don't know if it's going to allow you to see it, it's got them locked in the central neutral position. So one of the issues I ran into is when I first installed the cable clamp. If you see back further, is I went full travel to the rear, which I'll demonstrate now. Actually, full up is where I was getting some interference there. It was hitting this stiffener here. So what I did was shorten the push-pull rod here and then adjust my center position, which you can see on this particular servo. When I have it locked in the center position, I put Sharpie marks on top for reference so I know what is centered. So I looked at that when it was outside the plane, put those marks on so I have a good reference now for where center is. So I had to reposition this cable clamp so I didn't hit back here. If you don't have this rigging tool or don't have access to it, you can always use a clamp and gently clamp the elevator tip to the horizontal and keep it in a neutral position. But we are in pretty good shape now. We'll connect up the DB9 connectors and then shift our focus to the wiring. And then we can run the servos through their tests and verify everything's good. Now, because I intentionally have not bent this cotter pin and this cotter pin, because I may need to adjust still, in the meantime, until I bend that, I'll put a piece of blue tape there and a piece of blue tape here to remind me that those need to be locked once the testing phase and the initial adjustments have been taken care of prior to flight. Now that we have the servos mounted, we're going to get into the wiring of the harness. We've got the harness routed to the servos. we've got the main connector routed to the hole in the panel that we want it to go to. Now I'm going to take a few minutes and go through and identify the wires on the harness and identify them with tape for where they go. So you can see on here I've gone through and identified each of these items, and what I've done is created a little tape tag that I'm going to stick on the wires to remind me when I'm in the aircraft. Some of them are D-sub high density pins, some of them are Molex pins, and some of them are like King audio pins. So we just have to be aware when we actually do this wiring to put the correct pin on the correct wire, otherwise we get to do it again. We've now transferred all of our tags to the individual wires that are going to be connected within the panel. And now we're going to switch gears and come back to the rear of the aircraft and put our DB9 connectors on there. You'll find in the wiring diagram it calls them out very clearly which pin goes on which, and we'll do that now.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that takes care of part 2 of the Trio Autopilot install. So now stay tuned for part 3, the final, which includes some flight testing. So we hope you find all this useful and informative. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great day flying your Grumman. So here are the cute kittens all being quiet on the sofa on this nice cold day. Thought you'd enjoy it, so take a look at these little beauties. They're 8 and 10 months old each.